Imagine this. You're a college student pulling an all-nighter, cramming for an exam, and you ask ChatGPT to summarize 50-page reading in 5 minutes. Or maybe you're using an AI tool to fine-tune your resume before applying for internships. AI is already woven into your daily life, often in ways you don't even realize. But here's the big question. Are you preparing for a future where AI isn't just a tool, but a collaborator, a decision maker, and even a competitor in the job market? Today, we have an expert who spent her career studying exactly that. Dr. Aleksandra Przegalinska is a leading voice in AI, exploring how it's reshaping work, education, and society. She's worked at MIT, advised businesses on AI strategy, and is at the forefront of research on human AI collaboration. If you're wondering how to make AI work for you, not against you, this episode is packed with insights and action steps you won't want to miss. Thank you so much for being here, Alexandra. Super, super excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
You have a phenomenal background. I want to talk about AI, education, getting students into AI. But first, I want to ask AI is shaping industries and careers. From your perspective, why is it essential for undergraduates to understand AI, even if they aren't pursuing a technical career?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Ryan, because it is actually true that artificial intelligence right now, I think, is comparable to the internet 20 years ago. So it's
Mm,
not just a technology that tech people should be interested in. It's actually a platform, sort of. It creates a new economy and it's a new way of doing things like the internet. I think this comparison is really good. So there are no professions where I think internet would be completely absent. Everybody
yeah,
uses it. It's obviously a very natural thing for us to do. It's something that we notice only when it's not there. We
yeah,
just take it for granted, right? And I think very likely the same thing will happen to AI in the coming years because it's getting naturalized. We call it that way very often, sort of in
naturalize.
more academic settings. So it's a technology that we still notice when we use it, but I think 5 years from now, whatever it is that we're doing, drafting something, working with databases,
Yeah,
writing, creative writing and stuff, whatever it is that we do, we will probably do it with AI. And if we don't, it's going to be our conscious decision not to, because it's going to be embedded everywhere. So it doesn't really matter what you study, you are going to deal with artificial intelligence in your life. And I think students know it already.
for sure. Do you envision like an industry that'll be impacted by AI more than others? I'd love to hear that advice from you.
Well, it's a tough question because wherever you look, it's sort of there. Doesn't matter. It can be healthcare sector, in the humanities, social sciences, even in politics, in
Yeah,
logistics. It's everywhere. But I would say that when it comes to generative artificial intelligence, what we are seeing is a big impact on creative industries, and that's
yeah,
something we have not seen before. So prior waves of AI, because obviously it's a technology that's with us, has been with us for the past what, like 8 decades, right?
yeah.
Obviously not as developed as it is right now, but the past 2 decades at least, this technology has been developing, and you would see it in weather forecasting on social
Yeah,
media,
yeah.
optimization of various processes. So there was a lot of predictive analytics happening for many different businesses. But I think now what is very different, and many experts I don't think saw that coming, is that you have a technology that is really changing creative industries, right?
Yep,
Film, advertising. And here you see a lot of it. And I think the impact is very big because you can really completely change the way you've been doing things.
for
And
sure.
we saw that also in our study that we did with Harvard University, with Kosminski University, so the university where I teach back in Poland. We did a study with marketers and we
Yeah,
gave them an assignment to create an advertising campaign where you have many different tasks. Some of them are very routine and kind of there's nothing special about them. There are others that are very strategic. You have to make decisions or very creative. And in all of these tasks, you would use artificial intelligence and it would speed up the process but also
for
change
sure.
the quality of your work. So I think here, that's a kind of special sector that has not been tackled by technologies prior.
Yeah, that's what I honestly resonate with so much because, like, I'm a marketer myself and, like, I use chat I was just talking to a team member about this yesterday. I use ChatGPT so much for
Yeah.
just, like, creative stuff and, like, quickly, like, build campaigns, quickly build, like, emails. It is, like it is crazy how much AI has, like, impacted me and, like, has made me more efficient, but
Mm.
big picture here, I mean, AI in society, that's obviously a huge topic that comes with artificial intelligence because you focus a lot on that human AI collaboration and ethics. I mean, what are the key societal shifts AI is driving that students should be aware of? I just like love this topic of
Yeah,
it.
that's a very good question because I think we tend to delegate lots of things to artificial intelligence. It became available to all of us. There are no barriers in the sense that
Yeah.
you prompt it and it's very easy to use. Although it is tricky because some people maybe are not putting so much emphasis on how they prompt, whereas they
Yeah.
should to avoid hallucinations, to actually use this technology and use its full potential. I think you have to be quite a good prompt crafter. That's how I
Yeah.
would call it. But, even if you ask in a very naive way and less contextualized questions, it's still okay. You'll still get your response. So I think we have this tendency to delegate a lot of stuff to AI once we
Yeah.
get used to it. And with that, I think we have to be quite careful. So what we are now interested in is what's the division of labor between yourself and AI when you are
Mm,
using it at work? And I think is a very big question because as I said, for various creative tasks, actually you can lose some if you're going
yeah.
to overuse artificial intelligence. And I would be even curious to hear your insights because in marketing, it seemed to us in the set of experiments that we were doing that, for instance, people were much better at coming up with very original names for products, whereas AI
Ah,
is much more generic. And here we saw, well, the human side, this human contribution is very important because otherwise, what you're going to get is sort of mid quality thing that's
yeah.
okay, but not spectacular. So I think we have to find that good balance between what's okay to delegate and just get rid of from your daily routines.
That's really
Where
good.
you can have that system kind of set up meetings for you, maybe respond to certain emails, but where it's actually very important to have that human contribution and also human decision. So, this is something that we have not quite figured out yet, I think.
Yeah, that's what I think is like really important about AI is like AI can automate basically anything for you, can create a message for literally anything. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, like there needs to be that human element on it. And for like my prompts, I'd love to hear your advice on how to do a prompt. But like what a lot of times when I do my prompts with ChatGPT, it's like make it engaging and make it human because a lot of times what ChatGPT
Mhm.
spits out can be anyone can read, be like, that's ChatGPT. So I really try to like put some sort of spin on it. But I'd love to hear your advice on like how to
Yeah.
be a good ChatGPT like prompt or a good prompt
Mhm.
engineer, like what tips do you have for
Mhm.
us?
Well, one thing that I think it's good to be aware of is that the quality of the input given to you by ChatGPT or Gemini or any other tool like that is going to get lower throughout the dialogue. And what
Yeah,
that means is that that first response after your prompt is probably the best one,
that's
but
good.
you have that long thread, that long conversation, and you're going back and forth with the tool. But actually, each and every time, because of various issues related to optimization of that algorithm,
Yep.
actually the responses are not so good. So that's something that people should be mindful of. That if you want to squeeze out most of it, you have to either prompt very carefully and kind of make sure that you are initiating a new dialogue or reminding the model of what you wanted at the very beginning
That's really
and just
good.
kind of insisting on high quality because if you don't, what you're going to get is again something of a lower quality than at the very beginning of your conversation. So that's something I think important. The other thing is obviously context. The
Mm,
more you give, the more you get. And I know that people sometimes tend to kind of write very short prompts because they want to save up more
yeah,
tokens so that the model spits out like longer answers. But the truth is that versus the way I prompt, particularly for longer text, is I first build a meta prompt, which is that
mm,
initial prompt that is all about my intentions, why I
yeah,
want to do it, what's this work about, what's the goal, who am I? And only after that, I would start asking for very specific things. And I think it's very important to set the context. And you don't have to be afraid of writing a lot
yep,
because actually opposite to all the systems that we've experienced prior, even like the search engine likes keywords, but ChatGPT likes long sentences and plenty of explanations. And it's going to thrive off like very well crafted prompt that really kind of explains to it where you are, where you want to
yep.
be, who you are. So I would not be afraid of that. I would actually try and write more and explain to it also what it's doing right, what it's doing wrong. Well,
I
some
love it.
people also incentivize it in different ways. I'm not sure if that's a good advice, but some people promise a tip or
Yeah,
they say that it's very important for the answer to be correct because well, their life depends on it or their career depends on it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
change the performance of the model, but I think in the long run, it's not the best strategy. You shouldn't overuse it.
Perfect. I love it. I think that's a really good. And honestly, like we're talking a lot about ChatGPT and like, of course, there's going to be a lot of ways that automation, AI could like replace jobs in the future. But what are some practical ways students can future proof their careers with AI in an AI driven job market right now?
Yeah, well, one thing is I think to really show awareness of this technology. It's quite
Yeah.
important. And again, it doesn't matter what you study, where you see yourself in 5 years. Obviously, the market will be changing. Our jobs will be affected by this
Yep.
technology. And it's going to produce some new jobs and new specializations, but it's also going to get rid of some jobs. So, for instance, I don't know, a person who was like reading audiobooks as a profession, was a lector,
Yeah. Yeah.
that job because of the possibility to clone voices might really go away. I don't think there will be a very massive shift in the coming few years in terms of the job market. We will still see many of the professions that we know, but for sure what's going to change is the content of your work in the sense what you do at work will
Mhm.
change, not the profession and its name
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
So that I think is important. So I think it's quite important to familiarize yourself with this technology to understand also, yeah, how to prompt it. That's an important thing, right? It's very different to prompt, say, a model that produces videos or a diffusion model that
For
generates
sure.
images. It's more precise, much more formal. And
Yep.
then talking to ChatGPT is yet a different thing. But it's also good to know the differences between the models. So, for instance, I very often use Claude for long text because I know that, for instance, if I give it an appendix, it's going to read all the details and will not hallucinate, will not lose the content of my
Yeah. Yeah.
appendix when it kind of based on that is working on something else for me. That's important to know that there are some models that are very good at reading documents and
Yep.
there's others that are like storytellers. And I think ChatGPT is more of a storyteller, for instance, very good for creative work, less so for work that is very meticulous and sort of diligent. So it's good to familiarize yourself with many different models out there. I think that's something that matters. But also I think for me, what matters, and I appreciate that also in the job applications that come to us and to our
Yeah.
research team, that is understanding the limitations of this technology, right? That it
Mhm.
hallucinates, that it's not always right, that you have
Yeah.
to really fact check very often and curate the content that it gives. And that quite often, as I said before, delegating too much to it is very visible. I'm not sure if you noticed, Ryan, but I see many websites that have been built really with ChatGPT support that I think was kind of too much in the sense that you can
Yeah.
immediately notice that it's been generated 100%. And then what it feels like is that somebody did not even put enough effort
Yep.
create something for you, something that you would like to read, but instead they've just generated it. And in that way, I think it doesn't send the best message to the audience. So for instance, I don't like fully generated CVs. I
Yeah.
understand that somebody wants to use AI to create a better one or create different versions. But if it's like that chat GPT lingo that I
Yeah. You
just
know it too.
like,
Like, you know the ChatGPT lingo.
yeah, I think this is something we should be getting rid of. That it's not
Yeah.
best practice for sure.
Yeah, that's what I 100% agree with, and in the creative space, we keep going back to that, but, like, if I get on a website and I see, like, Dolly generated images on there, like, it just takes away, like,
Yeah.
that human touch that, like, makes a website, like, really stand out. So if I see those Dolly images, I'm just like, "Well, this is kinda like a poor business in a sense." Like, they couldn't, like, afford to. I mean, yes, they're being more efficient maybe, but, like, at what cost? So I think, like, especially in the creative space, it's super important to think about using ChatGPT, but not overusing ChatGPT.
Yeah, and also like finding the interesting ways to use. I'm going to give you one example because I wrote a book with ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. Me and my
Yeah.
co-author, Tamila Trentoro, we wrote this book. It's called Converging Minds, and it's actually about collaborating with AI. So we
That's
decided
awesome.
to use AI to write about that collaboration, but also kind of maybe treat this book as an example of how this collaboration could work. And we had many different AI assistants. One was responsible for aligning our styles, right?
Yep.
Because each and every one of us like works and writes in a different way. So for the two of us, it mattered that there is some sort of alignment. And we used ChatGPT for that. It worked sort of well. But the best role that we've discovered for ChatGPT was actually not something that generates the content of the book instead of us. We were writing the notes and the initial versions. But our critic, we gave it a role, and that was the prompt. You are a critic who does not like this book,
Yeah.
maybe is very critical of it, but has their
That's good.
reasons. And also, your criticism is always very productive and constructive. So every time we would finish a chapter, we would send it to ChatGPT, and then we would get a very good response that I think ultimately was elevating the content that
Yeah, yeah.
writing. So the critic is such a good role that I said to our team, hey, let's use the critic for our grants applications. Whenever we write something like an article, let's just send it to the critic. We're going to have very good feedback, constructive feedback for free. So,
Yeah.
and very available, sort of immediately available whenever we need it. And I found that role to be particularly supportive in my work. So
Interesting.
it's important to look for maybe less trivial solutions and not just, as I said, just delegating stuff to it, but instead engaging in a conversation with this model, giving it roles that are interesting also
That
and
is
help you
interesting.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's like so many different ways you could use ChatGPT, but I want to talk about skills for students that
Yeah.
they should be developing because you have done a ton of research on like AI collaboration. So, what skills do you see as like most valuable for students to develop work to work alongside AI rather
Yeah.
than be
Mhm.
replaced by it?
Well, the one skill that we mentioned prior is really prompting, right? So do
Yep.
not disregard it. It's quite important to be kind of mindful of what is it that you want from this model. Like you are talking to a collaborator, right? You
Yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
you're working on a project with your collaborator, you always try to make sure that you guys are on the same page. And so here, just if you treat it as a sort of sparring partner or your critic or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
also make sure that you are on the same page. So I think that's an important skill in this critical thinking, right? So always being aware that it's still just a tool. It's a
Yeah.
statistical model. Obviously, it's spectacular and it can do many things even better than us. But there are also some things that are very trivial to us that are going to be very difficult for ChatGPT. And I think the longer you work with these models, the more you see that it's not the same as human intelligence. There are things that you grasp immediately, and this model doesn't. Whereas there are also things that you would never do, particularly in a short amount of time. And then
Yeah.
this model kind of comes up with all the analysis for you, parses data, whatever, right? I mean, sends you like super interesting insights. So
Yeah.
I think that's important. This ability to collaborate with others, with humans, but also with those non-human actors like AIs, right? And
Yeah.
figuring out what the place of AI is, for instance, in your team. Do you want an assistant for the whole team? Do you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
a critic like we did, right? Do you want a member of the team? Maybe do you want, like, if you are, let's say, engaging in something like creating a marketing campaign for a product, maybe you just lack one role on the team. You don't have
Yeah.
that particular role. Maybe you want to create yourself an assistant, a helper that's going to be supportive in that area in particular. So I think being collaborative, being open to collaboration also with AI, because in the future I do believe that we will have hybrid teams. We will have
Yeah.
teams where there will be many people and a couple of AIs, or the other way around, maybe many
Yeah,
AIs,
yeah. Yeah. A
and
couple
human.
people. I think
It's
what I
possible. So that's
yeah, what I think is also important with what you said, there's like the critical thinking piece. We had some team members on our team that were younger. They were sophomores, juniors in college.
yeah.
And what really took me back is like how much they leaned on ChatGPT for like critical thinking skills. While it's great thinking to be like, okay, like I could use ChatGPT to just do this, I think you still need to be able to critically think as like an individual and not have to use
Yeah.
ChatGPT. I think that's an important skill students should learn.
And also one thing is that, and I think it's important to kind of stress that everybody has access to this technology. So
Yeah.
if you want to stand out, you have to figure out what's your way of using it that should be unique, because it's a democratized technology at this point, right? Everybody
Yeah.
uses
Yeah.
something, right? Be it Claude, ChatGPT, DeepSeek now, right? The Chinese model,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
any other. We have in Europe also a couple of different models, maybe smaller, but they're here and they're available. So it is a great equalizer in a sense
For sure.
that you may think that you will stand out because you've just used it and your text or whatever just reads so well, but everybody else did too.
Yeah.
So here, like, what I see is that engaging in a conversation with this model, in depth conversation, back and forth, being mindful, being critical of its limitations is something that produces more value. Whereas if you just decide to delegate it, probably 90% of the classroom did the same.
Yeah.
So me as a teacher, when I see such works and they're so similar to one
Yeah,
another,
yeah, yeah.
one of them really stands out. And that is a problem too, I think, for that person that decided to delegate everything to AI.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wanna ask about, like, standing out as well, because obviously you've seen job applications, you've worked with, like, undergraduates as well. In the specific field of, like, AI, what are some projects students can work on to, like, really stand out in the field and get that experience in undergrad? Is it internships? Is it projects? Is it
Mhm.
research opportunities? Would love to hear what actually stands out to you when students are
Yeah.
applying.
Well, we have a very, I think, interesting project right now, and I usually want to involve my students in the research projects that we do.
Yeah, yeah.
Lately, we want to create, and I think it's a very controversial project, but it's also interesting. We want to create like a supportive boss versus not so supportive boss that actually is AI, right? So
Oh,
we want to
interesting.
create two AI roles. One is just like a boss that is like not so helpful, and the other one is more of a mentor, and we want to check.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think it is cool. We want to check which one actually impacts your performance in a better way because I think it's not obvious at all which one will. We would prefer the mentor, obviously, as
For
humans
sure.
probably, but it's kind of interesting for us. And so our students are involved in building these bots. They're also
That's
involved in
awesome.
the experimental design. And I think these sorts of things, whenever you have an opportunity and your professor offers you a possibility to engage in an experiment or a project, research project, even if you are just going to participate as a study participant, not the person who's involved fully in like figuring out how this experiment should run, but you are just the subject sort of that experiment, it's still a very valuable experience. So do not miss out on these chances. I'm trying to engage my students as much as I can. And very often, what I see is that they have better ideas than me because they're AI native quite
Yeah,
often.
yeah.
And I think,
Seriously.
yeah, many of them are like they have so many good ideas and they also bring them to us. And it's like very interesting. Recently, I had this conversation with our students who said, well, frankly, we don't read all that much. We talk to documents because we just send them to ChatGPT and then we, like you said at the beginning, ask about the summary or like we just want
So
most
crazy.
of our and I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. It's a research field. How we change in terms of digesting information. This is very transformative. So I'm always very open to kind of discussing with our students what's their perception of this technology because I think it does drive our experimental design, the questions that we ask and the research that we do. So yeah, I mean it's always very exciting and for the students I would say please kind of stay engaged and
Yeah.
open-minded and your perception is very valuable.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is a crazy and, like, I didn't even know how I would use ChatGPT in undergrad, but I know it would help me out, like, a lot, especially for studying for tests here. But as we wind down today, just, like, final advice, where should students start? So for students that wanna be in the AI field that are like, "Okay, like, I'm interested in
Yeah.
complementing AI, helping AI out," like, what advice or yeah, what's one simple action they could take to actually get started in AI?
Well, I know that it can get a bit overwhelming because there's so much content on AI everywhere on YouTube, and then sometimes it's not very structured, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
all over the place. I would say that it's sort of if you're serious about it, what one thing that matters is that you try lots of things. You talk to these models in different ways. Like we said, you try different prompting techniques. You
Yeah.
familiarize yourself with different models, and that's kind of self-based learning through experimentation. That's one thing. But the other is but perhaps there are some courses that you would want to consider as a student. There
Yeah.
are many courses out there. I'm, for instance, involved with Campus AI. It's a Polish platform, but it's also available in other languages. And it's sort of an AI native school that teaches you about AI while you're using it, sort of. So it
Oh, that's
uses AI
amazing.
to show content to you. There are avatars there, clones of voices you can try to make, some of them by yourselves. And it's sort of also explaining how to build an avatar while you are experiencing an avatar that talks to you. So I think it's super useful. But also there is a course that I think is called Elements of AI. And it's a free course sponsored by the Finnish government with all the basics of artificial intelligence, including Gen AI. So I would look for legit sources of knowledge, something that is really well designed, that has been curated for you, and maybe focus less on TikTok shorts about
Yeah.
AI and try to find something that will guide you through it in a more meaningful way. That always is very helpful.
I love it. Well, Dr. Alexandra, if someone's like, oh my gosh, you know what? I need to learn more about her. I want to ask her a question about AI. Where can people connect with you and learn more about you?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. I'm always happy to talk.
Awesome. You're the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.